The Cathedral of Holy Wisdom, also known as Hagia Sophia of Constantinople, Ayasofia, is an architectural monument located in Turkey. It is a world-famous masterpiece of Byzantine architecture and a symbol of the Golden Age of Byzantium. The most magnificent structure of the Justinian era, the church was built in the Byzantine capital between 532 and 537. Today, it is the former Patriarchal Orthodox cathedral situated in the historic center of modern Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, in the Sultanate district. Its current official name is the Grand Hagia Sophia Mosque. During the period of the Byzantine Empire, the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia stood adjacent to the imperial palace. In 1453, after the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople, the cathedral was converted into a mosque. In 1935, it was granted the status of a museum. In 1985, Hagia Sophia, together with other monuments of Istanbul's historic center, was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List. In 2020, it was once again designated as a mosque. For more than 1,000 years, the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople remained the largest church in the Christian world until the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The height of the building is 55.6 meters, and the diameter of its dome measures 31 meters. History. The first Christian church on this site was built on the Augustion Square between 324 and 337, during the reign of Emperor Constantine I. According to Socrates Scholasticus, the construction of the first church, called Sophia, belongs to the reign of Emperor Constantius II. In the opinion of N.P. Kondakov, Constantius merely expanded the building originally erected by Constantine. Socrates Scholasticus provides the exact date of the consecration of the church. After Eudoxius was elevated to the episcopal throne of the capital, the great church, known by the name of Sophia, was consecrated. This took place during the 10th consulship of Constantius and the 3rd of Caesar Julian, on the 15th day of the month of February. From 360 to 380, Hagia Sophia was in the hands of the Arians. In 380, Emperor Theodosius I transferred the cathedral to the Nicene Christians, and on November 27th, he personally led Gregory, the theologian, into the church, who was soon elected the new Archbishop of Constantinople. The neighboring churches of Hagia Sophia and Hagia Irene received their names in honor of the divine concepts of wisdom and peace, respectively, reflecting the late antique tradition of personifying abstract ideas. The first church of Hagia Sophia was burned down during a popular uprising in 404. The church that was rebuilt afterward was destroyed by fire again in 415. Emperor Theodosius II ordered the construction of a new basilica on the same site, which was completed in that same year. This Theodosian basilica was destroyed in 532 during the Nika Revolt. Its ruins were discovered only in 1936 during archaeological excavations on the territory of the cathedral. The churches built under Constantine and Theodosius were large, elongated five-aisled basilicas oriented from west to east. Knowledge about them is limited and comes mainly from archaeological findings, which indicate their impressive size and rich marble decoration. Based on ancient descriptions, archaeologists have also concluded that two-tier galleries were located above the side aisles, similar to those in the contemporaneously built church of Hagia Irene. The Justinian Basilica. According to John Malalas, the church burned down on January 13th, while the Paschal Chronicle dates the fire to January 14th to 15th, 532, during the Nika Revolt. 40 days after the fire, Emperor Justinian I ordered the construction of a new church of the same name on the same site. According to his vision, it was to become an adornment of the capital and a manifestation of the greatness of the empire. According to S. Ivanov, the church was built as a vow to atone for the killing of 30,000 people during the suppression of the uprising by imperial troops. To erect this monumental structure, Justinian purchased the surrounding plots of land from private owners and ordered the demolition of the buildings located on them. To oversee the construction, Justinian invited the finest architects of his time, Isidore of Miletus and Anthemius of Tralles. They had previously proven their skill through the construction of the little Hagia Sophia, which served as a prototype for the new cathedral. Under their supervision, 10,000 workers were employed on the site every day. History of construction. The domed cathedral, almost square in plan, brought about a revolution in Christian church architecture. Only the finest building materials were used in its construction. Marble was transported from Proconnesus, Numidia, Caristos, and Hierapolis. By imperial decree, architectural elements from ancient structures were brought to Constantinople. For example, 8 porphyry columns were delivered from Rome, taken from the Temple of the Sun, and 8 columns of green marble were brought from Ephesus. In addition to marble decorations, Justinian, wishing to endow the church he was building with unprecedented brilliance and splendor, used gold, silver, and ivory. The Russian pilgrim Anthony of Novgorod, who composed a description of Constantinople before its sack by the Crusaders in 1204, provides the following account of the cathedral's altar. In the great altar, above the holy great table, beneath the canopy, hangs the crown of Constantine, and with it hangs a cross. Beneath the cross is a golden dove. Around the canopy hang the crowns of other emperors. The canopy itself is entirely made of gold and silver, and the altar columns and the ambo are all of silver. And this is a wondrous and awe-inspiring holy site. In Holy Sophia, in the great altar behind the holy throne, stands a golden cross, taller than 2 men, adorned with precious stones and pearls. Before it hangs another golden cross, 1.5 cubits long. Before it hang 3 golden lamps filled with oil. These lamps and the cross were made by Emperor Justinian, the builder of the church. The unprecedented magnificence of the church so deeply impressed the popular imagination that legends arose about the direct involvement of heavenly powers in its construction. According to one legend, Justinian intended to cover the walls of Hagia Sophia with gold from floor to vaults. But astrologers foretold that at the end of time very poor kings would come who, in order to seize all the wealth of the temple, would demolish it to its foundations. Concerned for his legacy, the emperor limited the luxury of the building. The construction of the cathedral consumed 3 years' worth of the Byzantine Empire's annual revenues. According to tradition, upon entering the completed church, Justinian exclaimed, "Solomon, I have surpassed you," referring to the Temple of Jerusalem. The solemn consecration of the church took place on December 27th, 537, and was performed by Patriarch Minas of Constantinople. Historian N.D. Barabanov cites a 9th century account stating that, in honor of the consecration, a large number of animals were sacrificed near the church and grain was distributed to the poor. Procopius of Caesarea, a contemporary of the construction, enthusiastically described Hagia Sophia while recounting the building projects of Emperor Justinian. This church presented a marvelous spectacle, unique to those who saw it and utterly unbelievable to those who heard of it. It rises as if to the heavens, and like a ship upon the high waves of the sea, it towers above other buildings, leaning as it were over the rest of the city, adorning it as one of its components, while itself being adorned by it. Being part of the city and belonging to it, it nevertheless rises so high above it that from there one can see the entire city as if in the palm of one's hand. From the moment of its construction, the church acquired the name the Great Church. For the performance of services, the cathedral possessed an abundance of precious liturgical vessels. According to Dorotheus of Monemvasia, the creation of the cathedral's precious altar involved the use of gold, silver, copper, electrum, iron, glass, many precious stones, rubies, emeralds, pearls, tin, magnetite, onyx, diamonds, and up to 72 different materials. Upon it, the emperor placed the inscription, "Thine own of thine own we offer unto thee, O Christ, thy servants Justinian and Theodora." During Justinian's reign, the cathedral's clergy and staff numbered 525 people, 60 priests, 100 deacons, 40 deaconesses, 90 subdeacons, 110 readers, 25 singers, and 100 doorkeepers. Under Emperor Heraclius, This number reached 600. According to Justinian's 43rd novella, each trade and craft guild was required to allocate a certain number of workshops, whose income was directed toward the needs of Hagia Sophia. Shortly after its completion, the interior of the church was described in detail by Paul the Silentiary in his poem Description of the Church of Hagia Sophia. The cathedral during the Byzantine Empire. Interior view of the cathedral vaults. A few years after the completion of construction, an earthquake destroyed part of the cathedral, including its rather flat dome. The eastern part of Hagia Sophia, beneath the holy altar, collapsed and destroyed the ciborium, that is, the canopy, the holy altar table, and the ambo. The engineers admitted that, in order to avoid expenses, they had not installed supports from below, but left open spans between the columns supporting the dome. Therefore, the columns could not withstand the load. Seeing this, the most pious emperor erected new columns to support the dome, and thus a dome was constructed, rising more than 20 spans higher than the previous structure. Chronographia of Theophanes, years 6051/551. Thus, the original flat dome was replaced by a new, relatively more pointed one. The cathedral also suffered damage from the earthquake of 989, during which the dome was especially badly affected. The building was reinforced with buttresses, causing it to lose its former appearance. The collapsed dome was rebuilt by the Armenian architect Tridat, the author of the Cathedral of Ani, who made the new dome even higher. On July 16, 1054, during a liturgy in Hagia Sophia, the papal legate Cardinal Humbert presented an excommunication bull to the Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Carolarios. In response, on July 20th, the Patriarch anathematized the papal legates. This event marked the beginning of the Great Schism, dividing the Christian Church into Orthodox and Catholic branches. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Constantinople was subjected to a devastating attack by the Crusaders, and Hagia Sophia was plundered and desecrated. Almost all of the cathedral's treasures were taken to the west, for example, the Shroud of Turin, which, according to tradition, once wrapped the body of Christ after his death. According to S. Ivanov, many valuables survived the looting and avoided destruction thanks to the Venetians, as they alone among the Crusaders understood the cultural value of these objects. Some items from the cathedral's decoration are still preserved in Venice today. The Orthodox Patriarch of Constantinople was expelled and replaced with a Latin Patriarch. Hagia Sophia was converted into a Catholic cathedral, where on May 16, 1204, Baldwin of Flanders was solemnly crowned as the first emperor of the new Latin Empire. In 1261, after the fall of the Latin Empire, the cathedral once again became Orthodox. In the 14th century, following another earthquake, the dome collapsed and was replaced by the one that exists today. During those years, the Lampidarios, chief chanter of the cathedral, was the renowned church composer John Claudius. The Ottoman conquest and the later fate of the cathedral. On the night of May 28 to 29, 1453, the last Christian service before the fall of Constantinople was held in Hagia Sophia. Its description, based on Byzantine sources, was compiled by the English historian Edwin Pears. The emperor and his retinue partook of the holy mysteries and bade farewell to the patriarch. The service was, in essence, a funeral liturgy. The empire was in agony, and it was fitting that the service for its departing spirit should be this public ceremony in the most beautiful of temples. At the time of the conquest of Constantinople, the cathedral was in neglected condition, as confirmed by European visitors of the period, such as Pero Tafur of Córdoba and the Florentine monk traveler Cristoforo Buondelmonte. According to historical records, the church was taken by the Turks on May 29, 1453. Sultan Mehmed II went directly to Hagia Sophia, admired the grandeur and magnificence of the building, and prayed there. Mehmed the Conqueror ordered the church to be immediately converted into a mosque and commanded his soldiers not to damage the sacred mosaics and relics. However, according to the historian Daucas, the locked gates of the church were broken down and armed soldiers rushed inside, plundering its precious decorations. In a single moment, they smashed the holy icons, stripping them of their ornaments, as well as the coverings of the holy altar. The precious and sacred vessels of the sanctuary, of gold and silver and other materials, were all carried off at once. According to later accounts, all those praying inside the church were killed, and according to a surviving legend, their blood reached a level marked today by a red stripe on one of the columns. The Byzantinist historian S. Ivanov that the legend claiming Mehmed the Conqueror rode into the cathedral on horseback and that his horse slipped on heaps of corpses has no historical basis. Among the Greeks, there survives a tradition that at the moment the Turks burst into the cathedral, the divine liturgy was in progress and the priest, carrying the holy gifts, was already approaching the ambo. To preserve the holy gifts, part of the altar wall is said to have opened and concealed the priest, who will remain there until the church is returned to the Orthodox. Then he will emerge and complete the interrupted service. On May 30th, 1453, Sultan Mehmed II entered Hagia Sophia and recited Surah 48, the Surah of Victory of the Quran. After this, the cathedral was officially converted into a mosque, which required the addition of 4 minarets. Since the building was oriented according to Christian tradition, with the altar facing east, Muslims had to adapt it by placing the mihrab in the southeastern corner of the cathedral toward Mecca, resulting in a noticeable rightward angle. Because of this alteration, as in other former Byzantine churches, Muslim worshippers in Hagia Sophia are forced to stand at an angle relative to the main axis of the building. Most of the frescoes and mosaics remained intact, which, according to some researchers, was precisely because they were covered with plaster for several centuries. Hagia Sophia Mosque was adopted by the Ottomans as a model for other great mosques of Istanbul, many of which surpassed it in size. In the second half of the 16th century, under Sultan Selim II and Murad III, heavy and rather crude buttresses were added to the building, significantly altering its exterior appearance. Until the mid-19th century, no restoration work was carried out on the structure. In 1847, Sultan Abdulmajid I commissioned the architects Gaspar and Giuseppe Fossati to restore Hagia Sophia, which was threatened with collapse. The restoration lasted 2 years. The Fossati brothers reinforced the columns and strengthened the vaults and dome with an iron chain. They discovered that well-preserved Byzantine mosaics survived beneath layers of lime plaster on the walls. They partially uncovered them in the upper gallery and showed them to Sultan Abdulmajid, who ordered that part of the ornamental designs remain visible, but that all depictions of saints be recovered. At the same time, 8-meter-wide wooden medallions, covered with leather and bearing the names of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad, were placed on the columns. Some of the Byzantine mosaics sketched by the Fossatis were damaged during the earthquake of 1894. After the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, and amid the rise of the Greek irredentist concept of the Great Idea, an extraordinary event took place on January 5/18, 1919. While the II Greek Division, part of the Entente Expeditionary Corps, was temporarily stationed in Istanbul, its military chaplain, the Cretan Orthodox hieromonk Lefteris Nefrakis, secretly entered Hagia Sophia before the morning Muslim prayer. Carrying the gospel and a portable andamention, he celebrated the first divine liturgy since the Turkish conquest, joined by accompanying Greek officers. In the late 1920s, early 1930s, archaeologist A.M. Schneider of the German Archaeological Institute uncovered, during excavations near the cathedral, a preserved fragment of a colonnade from the time of Emperor Theodosius. This discovery established that during the construction of Justinian's basilica, earlier foundations had merely been filled in and now lie below the level of the present floor. In 1935, by decree of the Turkish government signed by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, Hagia Sophia was transformed into a museum. Between 1931 and 1948, under the leadership of the American archaeologist Thomas Whitmore, the mosaics of the time of Emperor Justinian, as well as later mosaics of the apse and bema, the southern vestibule, the narthex, the southern gallery, and the northern tympanum, were uncovered from beneath the plaster. After the prayer carpets were removed, the cathedral's marble floor was revealed once again. The issue of changing the museum status. In 2006, a small room within the museum complex was allocated for museum staff to perform Muslim religious rites. In 2007, a group of influential American entrepreneurs and politicians led a movement advocating for the restoration of Hagia Sophia's original status. This initiative became known as the Free Hagia Sophia Council. During public hearings of the Congressional Human Rights Caucus of the U.S. Congress on June 20, 2007, chaired by U.S. Congressman Tom Lantos, the president of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, Raymond Buckley, stated in particular, "It is unacceptable to deprive people of the right to pray in their mother church. It is unacceptable to tolerate the daily desecration of this sacred place, which is used for trade fairs and concerts. It is unacceptable to continue allowing such open disrespect toward Orthodox Christianity and toward Christianity as a whole." According to historian A. Sokoloff, this position clearly reflected Greek influence in the United States. In April 2009, Chris Spyrou, president of the international movement Free Hagia Sophia Council, said in an interview with the Russian newspaper Zavtra, "We seek for the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia, the holy wisdom of God, to once again take its rightful place as a temple sacred to all of Christianity, as the mother of all churches, as the royal temple of orthodoxy, as it was before the Ottoman Turkish conquest in 1453. The fact is that Hagia Sophia was never a mosque and never truly a museum. It was always a Christian church that was converted into a mosque by the conquering sultan and later into a museum. I believe it is essential to return this temple to its original purpose." In 2016, during the month of Ramadan, Quran recitations took place inside Hagia Sophia and were broadcast live on a Turkish television channel. This provoked a strongly negative reaction from the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. On September 13, 2018, the Constitutional Court of Turkey rejected an appeal by the private organization Association for the Protection of Historical Monuments and the Environment, which sought to restore Hagia Sophia's status as a mosque, calling the demand inadmissible. In March 2019, it became known that Turkish authorities might change the status of Hagia Sophia so that it could be visited free of charge. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in an interview with the TGRT television channel, stated, "The status of Hagia Sophia may be changed from a museum to a mosque. Tourists of all faiths can currently enter the neighboring Blue Mosque free of charge. The same could be done with Hagia Sophia." On July 10, 2020, Turkey's Council of State annulled a 1934 decision that had turned Hagia Sophia into a museum and ruled that the building could be used as a mosque. On the same day, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan signed a decree officially converting Hagia Sophia into a mosque. This decision prompted official criticism from UNESCO, the World Council of Churches, the European Union, Austria, Germany, Greece, Cyprus, the United States, the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, the Patriarchates of Jerusalem and Moscow, the Church of Greece, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the Evangelical Church in Germany, and the Holy See. The World Council of Churches called on Erdogan to reconsider the decision regarding Hagia Sophia. On July 24, 2020, the first Friday prayer in 86 years was held at Hagia Sophia Mosque, performed by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan himself. During the prayer, images of Christian saints were covered with fabric. Worshippers gathered both inside the building and in the surrounding outdoor area. Entrance to the mosque was free for everyone from 2020 until early 2024. On January 15, 2024, entry for foreign tourists became paid, while remaining free for Turkish citizens. The ticket price was set at €25. Visitors can use an audio guide available in 23 languages. It was announced that tourists would have a separate entrance and exit, allowing them to visit the second-floor galleries and view Byzantine-era mosaics, areas that have been closed to tourists since 2020, when the museum was converted into a mosque. Turkey's Minister of Culture and Tourism, Mehmet Nuri Ersoy, stated that the new visitor management system would help eliminate long queues at the entrance. According to him, The decision was based on a UNESCO recommendation to develop a visitor management plan for the mosque. Restoration. In 2024, restoration work began on the mosque's facade and minarets. In May 2025, the largest restoration project in Hagia Sophia's history began, aimed at strengthening the structure and improving its resistance to earthquakes. For the first time, work will be carried out on the main dome. During the project, the lead covering of the dome will be removed, and the connections between the dome and the semi-domes will be reinforced. The condition of the four main supporting pillars and the subterranean structural elements will also be examined. Despite the restoration, the mosque will remain open to visitors, and religious services will continue throughout the works. Architectural features. In plan, the cathedral is an elongated quadrilateral, 75.6 by 68.4 m, forming three naves, a wide central nave and narrower side naves. It is a basilica with a square crossing crowned by a dome. The cathedral's gigantic domed system became a masterpiece of architectural thought of its time. According to Turkish researchers, the strength of the temple's walls was achieved by adding an extract of ash leaves to the building mortar. The center of the wide nave, square at its base, is bounded at the corners by four massive piers supporting enormous arches and is covered by a relatively flat dome 31 meters in diameter, whose apex rises 51 meters above the floor. The dome consists of 40 radial arches. In the lower parts of spaces between these arches are arched windows, also 40 in number, creating the impression of a continuous ring of light at the base of the dome. The dome is connected to the rectangular space below by spherical triangles, pendentives, which later became widespread in world architecture. To the east and west of the domed space adjoin two colossal niches with semi-spherical tops. Into the eastern niche open three smaller niches by means of arches, of which the central one, serving as the altar apse, is deeper than the others and project from the general plan of the church in the form of a semicircle. Three niches also adjoin the western large niche. Of these, the central one, which has a barrel vault rather than a semi-dome above, contains three doors leading to the inner and outer narthexes attached to the church. In front of them once lay a courtyard, now lost, surrounded by a colonnaded gallery. From the north and south sides, the domed space communicates with the side naves through arches supported by porphyry and malachite columns brought from temples of Asia Minor and Egypt. Beneath these arches runs another tier of similar arches opening into the domed space from the galleries, the gynoeceum, arranged in the side naves. Even higher, the enormous arches supporting the dome are filled in with a straight wall pierced by windows arranged in three rows. In addition to these windows, the interior of the church receives abundant, though somewhat diffused, light from the 40 windows encircling the base of the dome and from 5 windows in each of the large and small niches. The central nave of the cathedral, the altar area, and the main dome. The interior decoration of the church continued for several centuries and was distinguished by exceptional splendor, including mosaics on a gold background and 8 green jasper columns from the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. The walls of the church were also entirely covered with mosaics, both narrative compositions and ornamental designs. Thanks to its majestic architecture and rich decoration, the principal sanctuary of the entire state inspired a sense of the power of the Byzantine Empire and the church. This was reinforced by the size of the building, designed to accommodate crowds of many thousands, by the luxury of the interior finished in colored marble and decorative mosaics, and by the magnificence of the ceremonies held there. It was precisely in this new type of structure, the domed basilica of Hagia Sophia, that the characteristic tendencies of 6th century Byzantine art toward grandeur, majestic splendor, and solemnity were most consistently expressed. Byzantine art of the 6th century. Among the notable features of Hagia Sophia are the so-called weeping column, clad in copper, and the cold window, from which a cool breeze can be felt even on the hottest day. In 1935, the layers of plaster that had concealed the frescoes and mosaics were removed. As a result, today one can see on the walls of the church both images of Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, as well as quotations from the Quran on 4 large oval-shaped panels. On the railings of the upper gallery of the church, one can find graffiti left throughout the entire history of the building. The oldest of these are covered with transparent plastic and are considered protected historical landmarks. The mosaic cycle. A significant number of the mosaics of Hagia Sophia were created during the reign of Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. All surviving mosaics from this period are ornamental in nature and are located in the narthex, the naves, the galleries, and the main arch. The surviving mosaics depicting human figures and angels were created after the end of iconoclasm. These mosaics are examples of Byzantine monumental art and were executed from the mid-9th century to the 14th century. Mosaics of the apse and the bema. Mosaic depiction of the Virgin Mary with the Christ child in the apse. The earliest mosaics of the Macedonian period of monumental painting are those of the apse and the adjoining bema. The style of these mosaics is closely related to 7th century painting. In the apse, there is an enthroned image of the Virgin Mary holding the infant Christ on her lap. On the vaults of the bema, on either side of the Virgin, 2 archangels were depicted. Only the mosaic of the Archangel Gabriel has survived. Along the edge of the conch, there was a Greek inscription, now almost completely lost, with the following text. The images which the deceivers had cast down here, the pious rulers have restored. These mosaics were uncovered between 1935 and 1939. The Russian pilgrim Anthony of Novgorod, who visited Constantinople around the year 1200, reported that the apse mosaic was created in the 9th century by the icon painter Lazarus, who had suffered during the period of iconoclasm, but later, after the triumph of orthodoxy, gained wide recognition. This possibility was considered likely by Andrei Grabar and was not ruled out by Byzantinists Cyril Mango and Ernest J. Hawkins in 1965, although Mango had earlier dated these mosaics to a later period, up to the 11th century. According to Mango and Hawkins, 1965, the mosaics were executed in 867. Academician Victor Lazarev also dated the mosaic of the Virgin Mary to the 9th century and characterized it as follows. Archangel Gabriel, mosaic of the bema vault. Instead of subordinating the figure to the flat surface, the mosaicist places it as if it were emerging from the golden background. In this treatment, one can clearly sense remnants of the ancient understanding of form that may be called statuary. Equally strong are the classical echoes in the beautiful, feminine face of Mary. The soft oval, the well-shaped nose, the full lips, all give it an earthly character. Yet at the same time it captivates by its spirituality. Lazarev rated the mosaic of the Archangel Gabriel on the southern vault of the bema just as highly, considering that alongside the angels of Nicaea, this marvelous image represents one of the highest embodiments of Byzantine genius, and he also dated it to the 9th century. It is noted that the mosaicist conveyed a sense of impetuous spiritual power, though the proportions of the figure are elongated and the clarity of outlines is partly lost. In the mosaic, the archangel's left shoulder, slightly less than half of the halo, the upper parts of both wings, and the top of the staff have not survived. Mosaics in the chamber above the southern vestibule. The earliest phase of mosaic decoration also includes the images in the vaulted chamber in the southwestern corner above the southern vestibule of the cathedral. The entrance wall was decorated with a decis. The figure of John the Baptist has not survived. On the vault were 12 figures, of which only the prophet Ezekiel, the protomartyr Stephen in the orange pose, and Emperor Constantine have survived and can be identified. In the lunettes of the side walls are half-length figures of the 12 apostles and 4 Constantinopolitan patriarchs of the iconoclastic period, Germanus, Tarasius, Nikephoros, and Methodius. V.N. Lazarev noted the relatively low artistic level of these mosaics and suggested that they were created by craftsmen from monastic circles. He believed that their creation immediately after the end of iconoclasm explains the influence of folk art upon them. Mosaics of the southern and northern tympana. St. John Chrysostom. Around 878, mosaics depicting 16 Old Testament prophets and 14 hierarchs were created in the southern and northern tympana of the cathedral. Of these, only the mosaics of the northern tympanum have survived intact, depicting Ignatius the God-bearer, John Chrysostom, and Ignatius, Patriarch of Constantinople. These mosaics were uncovered between 1939 and 1948. Later, remains of the figure of Saint Athanasius of Alexandria were also revealed in the northern tympanum. The other mosaics have not survived. All the hierarchs in the northern tympanum are shown in the same pose, the right hand raised in blessing, while the left hand, holding the gospel, is covered by the folds of the vestment. V.N. Lazarev assessed the skill level of the mosaicists as not particularly high, but noted. The figures are broad and squat, the facial features large, still lacking the dryness and sharpness characteristic of later mosaics. The garments fall in calm folds, devoid of any calligraphic minuteness. The pinkish faces are mottled with greenish shadows. The palette is built on light, mainly gray and white, tones lacking the density and richness of color typical of the mosaics of the 11th century. The narthex entrance mosaic. Emperor Leo VI kneeling before Jesus Christ. During the reign of Emperor Leo VI, 886 to 912, the lunette of the narthex was decorated with a mosaic depicting Jesus Christ seated on a throne, holding the gospel open to the words, "Peace be with you. I am the light of the world," in his left hand and blessing with his right. On either side of him, in medallions, are half-length figures of the Virgin Mary and the Archangel Michael. To the left of Christ is the kneeling figure of Emperor Leo VI. Although the composition is asymmetrical, there is no corresponding figure on the right to balance Leo. The mosaic possesses a strict and balanced composition. This balance is achieved by means of a broad band at the bottom, against which the figure is placed, thus preventing it from forming an independent compositional spot. This band adds weight to the lower part of the image and gives it a solid construction. Andrei Grabar noted that this composition is quite rare in imperial iconography. It likely reflects a solemn religious ceremony. This interpretation is based on the description in Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus' work on ceremonies, which describes the ceremonial meeting of the emperor by the patriarch in a narthex of Hagia Sophia. The emperor listened to the entrance prayer from the patriarch and then, before entering the nave, bowed 3 times before this doorway. Parallels are also drawn between the mosaic subject and a poem by Leo VI, in which he describes the Last Judgment, falls at Christ's feet, and appeals for intercession to the Virgin Mary and the heavenly powers. Academician V.N. Lazarev characterized the mosaic of Emperor Leo's veneration of Christ as follows. In terms of execution, the lunette mosaic occupies an intermediate position between the mosaics of the apse and bema and the mosaic of the vestibule of Hagia Sophia. The figures still retain the heaviness typical of 9th century art. Large, rather massive heads, squat proportions, and large limbs. The drawing, especially in the treatment of drapery, is at times confused. The faces lack subtle spirituality, and the pale color scheme contains something sluggish and even impersonal. The Austrian art historian Otto Demas pointed out that this mosaic can only be viewed from below and at a very steep angle. This is because the mosaic tesserae were set into the wall at an angle so as to align with the viewer's line of sight. The mosaic of Emperor Alexander. Emperor Alexander. On the northwestern pier of the northern upper gallery of the cathedral is a mosaic portrait of Emperor Alexander. It was uncovered during restoration work carried out between 1957 and 1960 and is precisely dated to the year 912. The mosaic belongs to the type of votive images and is a lifetime portrait of the emperor. The figure is depicted in a frontal pose. Alexander is shown wearing precious imperial garments, girded with a loros adorned with gemstones and a crown with pendants. In his right hand, he holds a cylindrical object, an acacia or anaxacacia, and in his left hand an orb. The mosaic depicts the emperor during the Easter liturgy. According to the book on ceremonies, On this day, the emperor would proceed from the Great Palace to the cathedral holding the Hagia in his hand. According to George Codinos, it was a silk pouch filled with earth and would be girded with the lauros. On either side of the image are medallions containing the emperor's name and monograms that could be deciphered as, "Lord, help your servant, the orthodox and pious emperor." On the arches adjacent to the mosaic of Emperor Alexander, fragments of ornamental mosaics created at the same time as the portrait have survived. Among them, however, two fragments depicting acanthus shoots were discovered, dating back to the reign of Justinian I. Academician V. and Lazareff noted that a distinctive feature of this mosaic is the extensive use of silver tesserae in comparison to gold, which make up about 1/3 of the mosaic's background. In certain areas, for example, the thumb and the palm of the left hand, the preparatory fresco painting was left uncovered by tesserae. The mosaic of the southern vestibule, Emperors Constantine and Justinian before the Virgin Mary. The mosaic in the lunette above the door leading from the southern vestibule to the narthex of the cathedral dates to the last quarter of the 10th century. It depicts the Virgin Mary enthroned with the Christ child on her lap, and on either side stand the Emperors Constantine, on the right, presenting the city of Constantinople, and Justinian, on the left, offering the Hagia Sophia Cathedral to the Virgin. According to V. and Lazareff, the subject itself was borrowed from ancient art, as coins from Smyrna, Lesbos, and Philippopolis are known that depict Roman emperors standing with a model of a temple before an image of a patron goddess. According to art historian V.D. Likhacheva, this mosaic recalls the donor portraits of Justinian and Theodora in the Basilica of San Vitale. The depiction of Constantine and Justinian together in a single mosaic has no direct parallels in Byzantine art. Andrei Grabar suggested that the mosaicist may have copied an ancient prototype, since the emperors, although dressed in ceremonial garments of the 11th century, are depicted without beards, even though beards were fashionable at the time the mosaic was created. The mosaic is distinguished by an attempt to convey spatial depth. The ground plane and the perspective in the depiction of the throne give the composition a sense of space, and the figures themselves possess volume. Scholars also note an attempt to create historical portraits of the emperors. Academician V. Lazareff wrote that this mosaic is inferior to other examples of late Macedonian art, and, compared with the vestibule mosaic, is characterized by the use of purple, gold, and silver colors favored at the imperial court. Another distinctive feature is that in certain elements a linear, ornamental treatment becomes dominant. For example, the hands of the Virgin and the emperors are marked up to the wrists with curved but non-representational lines. The mosaic of Jesus Christ, Emperor Constantine and Empress Zoe. Jesus Christ with Emperor Constantine, 9 monomachos, and Empress Zoe. The mosaic depicting Jesus Christ flanked by Emperor Constantine, 9 monomachos, 1042 to 1055, and Empress Zoe is located on the eastern wall of the upper southern gallery of the cathedral. This mosaic is the latest work of Constantinopolitan monumental painting of the 11th century and is dated to 1028 to 1042. In the mosaic, Emperor Constantine and Empress Zoe present gifts to Hagia Sophia. Constantine offers a pouch of gold, while Zoe holds a scroll symbolizing her donations to the church. Originally, the mosaic depicted Zoe and her second husband, Michael for the Paphlagonian, 1034 to 1041. It is believed that after Zoe was exiled in April 1042, the new emperor Michael V ordered her portrait destroyed. When Zoe returned to Constantinople later that same year and married Constantine Monomachos for the third time, she restored her own portrait and replaced that of Michael IV with the portrait of Constantine Monomachos. However, these alterations affected only the heads. Around the same time, the head of Christ, destroyed earlier for unknown reasons, was also recreated. In the mosaic, Jesus Christ is depicted in a dark blue garment, blessing with his right hand and holding the gospel in his left. The imperial couple is shown wearing garments sparkling with precious stones. The faces of Constantine and Zoe are idealized, conveying conventional expressions of masculinity and gentleness respectively. The mosaic of the Virgin Mary and the Komnenoi. The Virgin Mary with Emperor John II Komnenos and Empress Irene. The mosaic depicting the Virgin Mary flanked by Emperor John II Komnenos, 1118 to 1143, and Empress Irene is located on the eastern wall of the upper southern gallery of the cathedral, next to the mosaic of Jesus Christ with Emperor Constantine IX and Empress Zoe. The mosaic is dated to 1118. The imperial couple is shown wearing luxurious garments richly adorned with gemstones. The infant Jesus Christ blesses with his right hand and holds a scroll in his left. Emperor John holds a pouch of gold for the church, while Empress Irene holds a parchment scroll symbolizing her donations. In 1122, when John declared his son Alexios Komnenos co-emperor, a portrait of Alexios was added on the side face of the adjacent pilaster. The face of the Virgin Mary is rendered with deep shadow modeling and rich color, while the faces of John and Irene are executed in a lighter, more graphic manner. The face of Alexios, thoughtful and stern, bears a clear family resemblance. The Desis Mosaic. The Desis Mosaic. On the western wall of the upper southern gallery is a mosaic depicting Jesus Christ with the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist, the Desis. The mosaic is dated to around 1261. Of the original composition, only the upper portions of the figures have survived. The images of Christ, the Virgin, and John the Baptist evoke associations with works of the 12th century and are characterized by a deeply individual interpretation. Strongly expressed character traits, combined with subtle color treatment and techniques of light and shadow modeling, are hallmarks of the developed Paleologan style. Academician V. N. Lazarev characterized the mosaic as follows. The faces, filled with profound spirituality, are rendered with exceptional care. Light greenish shadows possess remarkable transparency. Transitions from light to shadow are almost imperceptible, and in the most illuminated areas, pink and white tesserae of the most delicate shades are widely used. Mosaics of the Pendentives. Seraph Mosaic. On the pendentives of the cathedral were depicted 4 different figures of seraphim angels. The angels on the eastern pendentives are executed in mosaic, while those on the western pendentives were damaged before 1453 and later renewed as frescoes. The seraphim on the eastern pendentives were created in 1347. During the Ottoman period, the faces of the angels depicted on the pendentives were covered with metal star-shaped covers. In 2009, during restoration work, these mosaics were uncovered. Islamic architectural and decorative elements. After the conversion of Hagia Sophia into a mosque, gradual alterations to the building began. The minarets of Hagia Sophia were constructed at different times. The first brick minaret on the southeast side was built during the reign of Sultan Mehmed II, Mehmed the Conqueror. The northeast minaret was erected under Bayezid II, and the 2 minarets on the western side were constructed by the architect Sinan during the reigns of Sultan Selim II and Murad III. The marble-carved minbar, pulpit, was built at the end of the 16th century during the reign of Sultan Murad III. Under Sultan Mahmud I, in 1739 to 1742, the cathedral underwent reconstruction, during which a mihrab appeared in the former altar area. The present mihrab dates to the 19th century and was restored by the architect Gaspar Fossati between 1847 and 1849. On both sides of the mihrab stand bronze candlesticks brought in 1526 by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent from Buda. In April 2022, the Fatih Madrasa adjacent to the cathedral was restored and reopened. It had functioned as a madrasa from 1453 onward. From 1924, the madrasa building had been used as an orphanage. Slavic graffiti. Nearly all identified medieval Slavic graffiti inscriptions in Hagia Sophia of Constantinople are of East Slavic origin and were made by people from Kievan Rus. About half of these inscriptions date to the pre-Mongol period. More than 70 Slavic inscriptions have been found on the walls, columns, and balustrades. A high proportion of the graffiti includes indications of the author's places of origin. It is possible that one of those who left his autograph in Hagia Sophia was the Novgorodian icon painter of Greek origin, Alasi Gretchen. The archaic patronymic in the inscription of Domka Bazuvich, written with the omission of the vowel U, correspond to the name of the author of graffiti number 102 in St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev, dated to the 11th century. The largest concentration of Old Rus inscriptions is found on the wide windowsill of a walled-up window in the eastern wall of the northern gallery. It contains more than 20 graffiti that are paleographically and linguistically dated to the second half of the 12th century to the early 13th century. A 14-line inscription on the northeastern column in the western part of the northern gallery was written in a hand dating to the late 14th to early 15th century. Runic inscriptions. One of the runic inscriptions in Hagia Sophia. On the marble parapets of Hagia Sophia, there are inscriptions carved in Scandinavian runes. They were most likely scratched by warriors of the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine emperors during the Middle Ages. The first runic inscription was discovered in 1964, after which several more were found. It is assumed that additional runic inscriptions may exist, although no systematic searches of this kind have been conducted in the cathedral.